Okay, so we're about to enter year 3. And you've had kids throughout this process. You know how difficult it's been to navigate this. And I feel so bad. I mean, you feel bad for old people who were so isolated all these many years, especially for kids who were like, what is going on? So how did you stay in contact with your kids? How did you give your kids a sense of, this is who we are, this is our home, this is our family, this is our belonging. You haven't, the world, even though it's gone away, everybody is still here in some form. Well, Charlotte Donlon is with us. Charlotte Donlon is a writer, a spiritual director, host of the Hope for the Lonely podcast. Her newest book is called The Great Belonging, How Loneliness Leads Us to Each Other. Charlotte, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you.
Charlotte, you have kids, John has kids, I have kids, and I think every parent has had to negotiate a different set of issues. I think in my family, the biggest thing was disappointment. It was just, fortunately, our family was in a situation where we had enough money to make it, and we didn't have that extra bit of anxiety. My husband and I were both able to hold on to our jobs during COVID. Yeah. We were able to, get groceries, so our basic needs were met. But my daughters both, one was a senior in college, one was a senior in high school, and it was just one disappointment after another. So from your family, what were the struggles? What was the disappointment for you?
One very similar. So my oldest is 19. So she was a senior in college in 2020. And she was supposed to march in the Rose Parade that year, I guess a year ago. So she missed that. She missed all the fun graduation activities. My son is a junior now in high school, so he missed a lot of basketball, a lot of social things. And there was a lot of disappointment, a lot of sadness, a lot of frustration, and not even understanding what was happening. And very few adults understood what was happening. So I would say there was probably a lot of fear also. Like with the disappointment, there's fear and uncertainty as to like, what is going on and why is this happening and why can't things just be the way they used to be?
Right. So here we are. As I said, Charlotte, we're entering into our 3rd year of this. Things have gotten better, then they've gotten worse, and they've gotten better again. And now, it looks like, okay, as bad as they are, they're going to get better sooner rather than later. So how did you navigate with this? I mean, what advice did you give yourself to teach your kids how to deal with all this? And especially, as the family, we're fortunate. Like we said, our families are together, so we navigated this together. But of course, the kids were feeling like their worlds were blown up.
Yeah. So for me personally, engaging with art has always formed me and healed me. And by engaging with art, I mean music, listening to music, watching films, seeing visual art, putting myself in the way of beauty and sometimes not beauty, sometimes horror. To remind myself I'm a part of something larger than myself. There's a story larger than my story, than this story. And I think art has always been a way that I have been able to understand things that I don't have words for. And as a writer, it can be confusing and hard when I don't have words for something. So engaging with, and even literature helps me, poems, reading poetry. When I enter into art, I feel safer and I feel less alone. So this summer, I realized I had been doing that with my kids for 19 years. When I feel overwhelmed as a parent, because I rarely know what to do and how to do it and when to do it as a parent, I would turn to art. I'm like, well, let's go look at some paintings or let's listen to some music and try to have conversations around art that help me connect with my kids, help me offer my kids something larger than the story they're telling themselves in that moment. It starts with books. We read to our kids when they're very young, and we're all supposed to do that. And I think a lot of parents do that. They read to their kids. Well, I tried to keep reading to my kids, even as they got older. I read essays and poems, and I'm reading a book now with my son. And, of course it's not every day because he has school and basketball and all kinds of things. So it's not perfect and it's not in ways I would prefer. But when I help my kids enter into art and when we enter into art together, it does create some stability and connection in ways that are hard to find elsewhere, I think.
That's good.
The Ride Home streaming live on YouTube, so you can find us there and watch the show at The Word Pittsburgh. We have Charlotte Donlon via Zoom right here with us on the show. Charlotte is a writer, a spiritual director, host of the Hope for the Lonely podcast. And I want to highlight her newest book, which is called The Great Belonging, How Loneliness Leads Us to Each Other. Charlotte, I'm really inspired. I love how you have used art as a way to connect with your kids. I think that my husband and I were just talking yesterday about how when our kids were little, you're in this constant state of desperation, trying to figure out, how to manage and how to, make choices and those sorts of things. And my default was to always go to the library. If I didn't know what to do, I just went to the library. And what my husband said yesterday is he said, "You were at the library all the time." Well, that's because I didn't know what I was doing. But you've done the same thing, right? Except you've turned to art when you don't know what you're doing. And so why do we do that? It wasn't like I think going to the library made me feel better. Is art the same way for you?
Yeah. I mean, going to the library, even just listening to a Bob Dylan album or, anything that was outside of myself made me feel like someone was helping me, that this art, this thing bigger than myself, this story that's being told, whether by an author or a painter or a filmmaker or a photographer. And I'm talking all kinds of art, low art, high art, all of the in-between art. I don't need to only expose my kids to Bach and Vivaldi, although those are great. And I do help them listen to classical music. But I think if I tell most parents, I think you need to help your kids engage with art to help them feel less alone and to help them flourish and to mitigate any mental health crises that might come up. I think a lot of parents will be like, oh no, what do I do? I'm not an art expert. I think parents would feel nervous and scared. And I think my main message that I would love for parents to hear is just try it. Go to the museum for 20 minutes. I read 7 of the top selling parenting books a few months ago, and all of my theories about why art helps kids, engaging with art, not necessarily making art, although making art is good too. All of my theories are in line with these top selling books, but 2 of the books, so none of them mention engaging with art, and 2 of them actually were like, we know you have visions of taking your kids to the museum and that's what you think a good parent is. And, it's okay because it's going to be a disaster and you don't have to do that. And there are other ways to be a good parent. And I'm like, wait, you can take your kids to the museum, but it doesn't have to be a whole day ordeal where they have to act perfectly. And, you look at a million works of art, like no one has the capacity for that, So I've taken my son, who's 17 years old, to our local art museum twice in the past few months. And my godson, who's 5, I took him, we didn't stay longer than 30 minutes with any of those trips. It's like, you just kind of feel like it's just a little visit, we're just going to go and look at some art. And then I'm going to ask you some questions. What did you like? What did you not like? When I asked my son what he liked the most after one trip, I was fascinated by his response because it had to do with the technique and the intricacies of the painting technique, like not the image. And I was like, oh, so you're paying attention to those tiny, tiny details and wondering how the artist did that. You're not necessarily looking at this larger picture. So that helps me know him in a way I didn't know him before. And now, I go to the museum and see that painting and it connects me to my son and it connects me to this summer when we were dealing with some difficult things that you deal with teenage boys. And it creates this sort of web of connection and belonging or it's added to that web. I think many things can help create that web, but art is one thing that adds to the web.
That's interesting. We're talking about the pandemic and loneliness and giving your kids a place to be that's safe and secure. You know, in the midst of this, Charlotte, I got 2 boys, and they're in their early 20s. And my youngest said to me at one point, Dad, when I was a little kid, I was always worried that you were going to die. But now that I'm older, it's okay if you died. I mean,
that's sweet, I think.
And I get it. I mean, you know, I think a lot of guys feel that way. Like, if your parents die whenever, you know, you're 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 or whatever, you would be in turmoil. But then as, you know, you progress and you mature, you start to separate from your parents, and it's okay. You don't want them to die, but you do kind of sort of know yourself a little bit better and think, I think I can handle this. I took that as a positive sign that despite the turmoil, things were progressing as they needed to be. And that was a good thing.
Definitely. And he told you, like, he felt safe enough with you to say, hey, I really used to be afraid of that. And now he felt safe enough to say, I think I'd be okay if you died, right. Which can be a hard thing to hear as a parent, right?
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, kids have these very deep and very complex emotions like adults do. And I think, you know, oftentimes as a dad, I wasn't able to access, you know, what questions was I able to ask that could open up a door to a deeper conversation. That was always my struggle as a dad. I wanted to go into that. My dad had no connection to that whatsoever. So I vowed as a dad that I was going to try to open that door more so. And I think to me, that's the valuable thing. What can I do to deepen a conversation so my kids know me and know the situation better? Yeah?
Yeah. And along those lines, I have one great suggestion. I mean, you can still do this even though your boys are older, but, you know, a lot of parents have family movie night.
Sure.
So everyone get the popcorn, watch a movie. So I would love for parents and other caregivers to try going a little bit deeper and being a little bit more intentional with family movie night. So here are a few questions you could ask, say, after you watch a movie. Why did you think that character did that thing? What are 3 things you loved about that movie? What are 3 things you didn't love about that movie? What in that movie made you feel safe? What made you feel scared? If you were to create a different ending, what would you do? What would you have the main character do? So it's taking it a little bit further instead of just pressing stop or whatever we do now with TVs. You know, we don't have DVD players anymore. Turning off the computer or the screen and like invite your kids into a conversation. And I think most kids, even if you have trouble having meaningful conversations with your children for whatever reason, most kids are willing to enter into these conversations where art is the doorway to
deeper things,
to deeper things. And it's a doorway to knowing your kids and for your kids to know you. Like, not only do they answer those questions, parents and caregivers can answer those questions too. So it's a 2-way knowing, you know, they know us more and we know them more.
Right.
That's good.
That's really, really good. Charlotte, I've really enjoyed this so much. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's Charlotte Donlon. Check out her latest book, The Great Belonging, How Loneliness Leads Us to Each Other. Also, she's the host of the Hope for the Lonely podcast. You can find that wherever you find your podcasts.
Thanks, Charlotte.